Ako ay Pilipino, ang dugo'y maharlika. Likas sa aking puso at hikain kay ganda.
Tarlac State University, one of the professors there asked, how will, let's say, India sacrifice its economic ties, diplomatic ties with China just to help us? Because these were, in order to help us, they had to give up some economic relationship, diplomatic relationship with China. How are we going to convince the world to give their economic ties with China in order to help us? Are we doing enough effort to make the whole world admire us and sacrifice their economic ties with China, diplomatic ties with China to help us? How can we convince the world to support us in this fight, sir?
The same problem was faced by Nicaragua in the 70s. In the 70s, the U.S. mined the harbors of Nicaragua, the waters of Nicaragua, supplied arms to the rebels of the Contras. And Nicaragua sued the U.S. before the International Court of Justice for violating its territorial integrity. The U.S. refused to participate. The U.S. said ICJ has no jurisdiction. The ICJ ruled it has jurisdiction over the case, and later on the ICJ ruled that the United States of America violated the territorial integrity of Nicaragua and therefore violated international law and must pay damages. The damages was fixed later on at about $30 million. So with this ruling by the ICJ, Nicaragua went to the Security Council to demand that the U.S. comply with the ruling to pay the damages. And the U.S., of course, being a permanent member of the Security Council, vetoed that resolution. So Nicaragua went to the General Assembly. Nicaragua sponsored the resolution asking the General Assembly to vote that the U.S. must comply with international law. The U.S. must comply with the ruling of the ICJ. The U.S. must obey the rule of law. The U.S. as the exponent of the rule of law must show as an example to the rest of the world. Nicaragua won overwhelmingly, but there was a large group also that voted with the U.S. So every year Nicaragua would bring this resolution. And every year the votes for the U.S. would go down. It was a big hit on the reputation of the U.S. There was a huge reputational cost of the U.S. Here was the U.S. proudly saying that it was the exponent of the rule of law, and it was being called by the rest of the world as a rogue nation, as a violator of international law. So, diplomatically, it was a big loss to the U.S. They lost their moral ascendancy before the rest of the world. So finally, when Victoria Chamorro became the president of Nicaragua, she defeated the Sandinista candidate. The U.S. gave her government, during her first 2 years of presidency, $500 million, much more than the $30 million they were asking for damages. So Chamorro asked her parliament to repeal that law requiring the U.S. to pay the damages awarded by the ICJ. And that is how it ended. Eventually, the U.S. complied in a way that saved face for the U.S. Nicaragua was happy with that, and that's how it ended. There was compliance in the end. If you look at the decisions of the ICJ, the decisions of the International Tribunal, over 95% of the decisions were complied with in the end, eventually. At first, every country that law says, we will not comply, we will not honor. That is always the case, but eventually they complied. In Nicaragua versus Colombia, Colombia lost a huge area of waters. And they said, we will not comply, we will withdraw from the ICJ. Now they are complying. Because there will come a time when the cost of non-compliance will be much more than the cost of compliance. Now, how will this happen in our case? If we win, if the tribunal says the 9-9s are void, who will benefit? Malaysia, Vietnam, Brunei, Indonesia, even Japan, and all the rest of the countries. They will ask the rest of the world to join us in asking China to follow the law, to comply with the ruling. So we will not be alone. Nicaragua was not alone, but it was able to compare the superpower to pay those down. Carefully, in a way. But we are not alone. We are not alone here because behind us are approach on the other of the easy more so than us. So I think the moment we have the ruling, that is the game changer, because that will be the start of a one-way effect. Other countries will join us. They were ready that if we win, they will of course press for that because that is their way of solving their own problem in China. Because they will benefit immensely from the ruling. Even the EU and the US, Canada, and all the rest of the Western powers said, we approve the approach of the Philippines in going to arbitration. That is a peaceful settlement of dispute that is in accordance with international. But they're not saying they support us on the merits, not yet. Because they are waiting also for the decision. Once the decision is there, they will be forced to support the decision. That is because that is already in the merits. If you look at the constitution of the EU, the European Union, there is a provision there that the foreign policy, the European Union must follow international law. So, in other words, if there is a ruling saying this is the international law, 9-9 are void, they will be forced to support it. So, it will be a game changer. I think even China knows this. But it will take time. We should persevere. This is not going to be an instant gratification the moment we win. This will be an intergenerational struggle. Because we have to convince the Chinese people. It will take time. I'm happy that Taiwan is already on our side. And we will use Taiwan to explain that China must follow international law. That is regional intent of the 9-9 and even the international tribunal is already approved. So we have to persevere here. We are laying down, our generation is laying down the foundation for the next generation. Because we are, how do you change the mindset of 1.2 billion? It will take time. But we should persevere. Nicaragua persevere despite being alone. We are not alone. The US is with us. The European nations are with us.
Now we go to the reaction of ASIC De Vega.
During the presentation of my credentials, I noticed it wasn't mentioned that I was a deputy ambassador, last deputy ambassador of the Philippines to the UN, and I returned since last year. The reason why I mentioned that, I noticed the name of my Chinese counterpart was listed there, Wang Min. And I just start with a tidbit. And if I may be allowed to use both Filipino and English in my presentation. Funny thing is, in negotiations or discussions with the UN, the delegation, the Chinese delegation, we tend to look at each other carefully and so forth. And in certain conferences, we wait for what they will say, so that we will have the right of reply if they don't agree with what they're saying, and vice versa. So sometimes it happens, long debates, sometimes there's very few countries left in the hall, because you're not quite attend, and then sometimes the Chinese are there, I'm still there. And if I'm there, the Chinese delegate is still there. So sometimes, just one moment, I just stayed there without any intent to say anything, and then I left so late, like 7 p.m. And I could see the Chinese delegate leaving also. Maybe he was thinking, kung naman, lumintay pa ako yung pala lang sabihin ng Pilipinas na ano. So this is part of the diplomatic effort that we do. I can start by helping answer also the question of Captain Bagong. right now countries state that they support peaceful settlement, but no country will say the tribunal must decide on behalf of the Philippines. Of course, that's also infringing on the independence of the tribunal. But this is where Justice Carpio says it best. If we have the decision of the tribunal in our favor, then that will be a mighty weapon on our side. There are a few things that you have to remember also. One, again, we are not asking the tribunal to answer the question of sovereignty. When we say sovereignty, whose territory is that? We're not asking that because that is beyond UNCLOS. If I may go to the part about the picture of the rock discovery. All right. What we are asking for is for the tribunal to confirm the maritime entitlements of the features. In other words, irrespective of the issue of who owns, what are the minimum guidelines we have for us to exploit ITZ, for us to exercise our rights? I'll tell you why. This is what the U.S. lawyers also said. Here's Carpio. Of course, showing the Murillo Verano, it's ours. But is it really that important for now for the tribunal to say that is Philippine territory? Can you say Philippine territory? Of course, you want it to be determined as Philippine territory. But I can't live there. You can't live there. You can't stay there. What's important is the waters around it. What's important is to exploit the fishing resources around it. So this is where this case comes in. We're saying, we're not asking the tribunal, tell us, tribunal, does that belong to the Philippines or China? No, that cannot be part of the jurisdiction of the tribunal. Instead, we're saying, confirm that this is only up to 12-mile territorial sea. And then, if it's 12-mile territorial sea, then beyond 12 miles, we should be able to fish. In other words, China should no longer be blocking our fishermen from even approaching within 12 miles of the shore, whoever owns it. That's what we're doing it for. We're doing it for our own people who are deprived of their rights to fish. You talk about this poor Juan de la Cruz, dati nangingisda siya dyan, ngayon hindi na makalapit. It's being water cannoned. The Chinese and the Filipinos made some arrangement in 2012 where both sides will remove their ships. We removed ours, they have not. They've remained there. That's the importance of this tribunal case. Now, it was mentioned also my sin Spain. I could help you, sir, justice something. No? Bajo in Spanish means many things. It could be maliit, bajo. It could mean, for those of you who like music, no? There's tenor, baritone, and bass. Bass, yung oral, malaking boses, that's bajo also. It could mean bajos, that's the waters, but it also means shoal. So bajo de Masindok. So maybe those bajos there was not just referring to the waters, but certain elevations that we saw. So that even strengthens our way further, and that Murillo Verano map is very important. So that's one thing important, that we're not claiming sovereignty. Otherwise, we'll dismiss yan. There are things that Justice Carpio mentioned which we don't use for our own case because, well, there are various reasons. For example, he mentioned the militarization of the islands or the features and what China intends to do. Our lawyers don't use that because under 298, Section 298(1)(b) of UNCLOS, if there are military activities, that's beyond compulsory jurisdiction. So we have to say, well, we don't know, there's military activities and so forth. But this is where the value of resource people like Justice Carpio come in. They say and give opinions which can also generate debate. What's the end if you don't win it? Well, as a diplomat, it might not be very diplomatic to say it's the end of UNCLOS, but it's important for some people to give that idea. What I can say as a diplomat is that what we say is that, well, how can smaller countries be protected by the rule of law against larger countries if we cannot even be given a chance to present our merits? Right now, the tribunal is only in the jurisdiction phase. In other words, government authority to hear the case because China is saying they don't because this is a sovereignty issue. We have to hurdle that. We want a chance to go to round 2, which is the merits, because as already shown, and we don't have to debate it, our case is very, very, very strong. We would like to think that the tribunal will allow us at least to present our side on the 9-dash line, if not the features. Or they cannot simply dismiss the case without giving the Philippines something, because in arbitration they try for a win-win situation. If they can confirm the principles of law mentioned here. For example, let's look at the map with the 9-dash line and so forth. If they can confirm, all right, they said, there is no jurisdiction, but we want to confirm the principles of law which the Philippines must use in negotiating with China. Nobody can own the high seas. Low tidal emission cannot be appropriated. These are also helpful for us. They just cannot keep dismissing. If I get it right, and this is where I will ask the second round of applause, we had a big delegation there. I was there in The Hague, but that is not for purposes of simply traveling. That's for purposes of showing the tribunal how important this case is to the Philippines. So we had members of the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary present. And that's no mean feat, because I do not think that other countries, when they present cases before the ICJ or the Permanent Court of Arbitration, actually have members of all branches present. And that, of course, we would again give a round of applause for Justice Carpio for having been so, if I'm asked, where did we seem to be vulnerable, or I don't want to say vulnerable, but where was the complication with the jurisdiction aspect? For those of you studying law, you may take note. Before you present a case to court, it must be ripe. In other words, you don't just present a case. There should be, you should have exhausted all remedies and so forth. I got the impression, and this is the question I'm going to ask Justice Carpio before I close now. I got the impression from the tribunal that they seem to be harping on, did you try to settle it by negotiation with China? I got the impression that the main question they were having in their mind was, why will we hear this case if you haven't tried to fix it among yourselves first? They mentioned the use of code of conduct, Maritime cooperation. They were interpreting it in a way which indicate, try to resolve it by negotiations muna. Of course, we've already said the problem with negotiating is that we tried and then they say, no, you got your case first, or no, it's ours. It's hard to negotiate, no? That's why we need the law to protect us. However, one last thing before I turn to Justice Carpio. This is a long-term thing. I'll take another example of law being followed eventually. The Arctic Sunrise case where Russia did not participate. This is determination whether to release some people from our ship by Russia. We will not participate. But when the case was decided, they still followed the ruling without saying we're following the ruling because we accept the point. They used another excuse to follow the ruling, but they did. I remember one of the best friends of the Philippines, former President Ramos Horta of East Timor, saying when Indonesia invaded East Timor in the 70s and he went to the UN, he was first struck with the hypocrisy of the international community. They said, we support you, but nobody tried to help them against Indonesia. But it's a long-term thing. Eventually, Indonesia left because of international pressure. And East Timor is now, Timor-Leste is now an independent country and we're one of their best friends. So it's not something, don't expect, tribunal decides, China will be. No. One thing, no? It's a long thing. And remember, the very fact that we filed this case will be put out in history. We want to win. But whatever the result is, the one benefit of this case is, it shows that China's claim to sovereignty was contested. They will never be able to claim 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 100 years from now. Nobody contested the sovereignty. Philippines, not the other Asian countries, we did. We were the ones brave enough and determined enough to do so. So, again, thank you. And the question just comes in, is there cause for us to worry about that? And they kept asking, in effect, why don't you negotiate with China? I got that impression. Or maybe they were just trying to show, because of course China did not participate, so they have to show that they're very neutral.
Negotiations. UNCLOS requires, before you file an arbitration case, you must show an exchange of views with the other party that you tried to negotiate an amicable settlement before you file a case. That's the requirement under UNCLOS. So did we engage in an exchange of views? The phrase used in UNCLOS is exchange of views with China before we filed the arbitration case. This is what we told the tribunal. In 1995, when China seized Nishi Free, we asked China for negotiation. We sat down with China and we asked China, why did you seize Nishi Free? It's a low tide elevation within our EEZ. China said, no, we have indisputable sovereignty over the entire South China Sea.
This portion is brought to you by
Almost Whitening Soap. Narito na sa gustong pumuti at gumanda. Ito ang kasagutan sa problema mo, kapatid. Almost Whitening Soap sa murang halaga, kutis artista ka na.
Accepted. You cannot concede sovereignty. Your government will be thrown out by the people the moment you concede sovereignty. So, we can show that from 1995 up to 2012, we tried to negotiate. In fact, the other day there was a statement of the spokesman of the U.S. Embassy in the U.S. It appeared in the New York Times, and he said that, you know, the Philippines and China were talking, we're negotiating until 2012, but the Philippines stopped in 2012 and filed a case. Of course, we had to stop. From 1995 to 2012, 17 years, we cannot negotiate. On mischief relief, we negotiated until 2012. 2012, Scarborough Shoal, you mean to say another 17 years? In the land reclamation case between Singapore and Malaysia, the tribunal ruled that an exchange of views merely requires that the applicant state, the one who filed arbitration, must ask to sit down with the other party to present its objections, and the other side will talk. But it's up to the applicant state to determine whether a further exchange of views would be fruitless. Because the position of one of the parties there is that there was no exchange of views. But there was one non-verbal asking for a exchange of views. They sat down, and the court said that is enough. That's more than enough. In our case, we sat down forever with China, several years, and we begged them, let's sit down. And they said, you are just a small country, we are a big country, accept it. And it was really humiliating. The diplomats that we done, the Chinese would tell them, you know, we can take over Pakasa anytime. That's how they treat us. So we don't endure that. And we have narrated all of those exchanges, all those negotiations. And I think that's the ruling of the international tribunals is that an exchange of views requires only one exchange of views. That's enough. And you don't have to pursue if you believe it's the applicant state that determines whether it's fruitless to continue talking. And well, we talked with them 1995 to 2012. That's more than enough. So I don't think that's a big problem. That's we know, that's why China now is saying, let's sit down. You know, that's a trap, the way I look at it. Because if we sit down with them now and negotiate, China will say, oh, you see, this is the first negotiation. We can sit down with China, discuss post-negotiation situation of the dispute. China must accept that the negotiation phase, the exchange of views, is over. Now, under UNCLOS, the parties are encouraged to talk even while the arbitration is going on, because if they can come to an amicable settlement, of course the tribunal will be happy instead of deciding for them if they agree to settle an say this is the negotiation, then our case would be premature.
This portion is brought to you by
Ultra Pure Water Purifier. Samantala sa inyong lahat na gusto ng malinis na tubig, direkta sa inyong mga gripo, narito na ang Ultra Pure Water Purifier. Matipid na, garantisadong malinis na tubig ang hatid pa.
If we are getting only 1% of the budget going to defense, it will take a long time. The normal percentage of expenditure going to defense is about 2%, just to maintain where you are. But we are starting from a very low base. So at 1% we'll never be there. And China has double-digit expenditures based on their budget. So military-wise, we cannot beat China. So the next response, the third possible, is the legal approach. And that is what we have done. In the legal approach, we sued China in UNCLOS. And UNCLOS, the tribunal will decide without regard to how many warships you have, how many warplanes you have, how many atomic bombs you have. The UNCLOS tribunal will decide it based on the law of the sea. So we have brought the dispute to a level playing field, where the advantage of China is negated. And that's why China is not appearing, because it's a level playing field and they don't want. They want to fight because they spent their money on warships, warplanes. They want to use that in the fight.
So you can expect more news and news headlines in the coming weeks. This last one, China's reclamation poses national crisis for the Philippines. From Justice Carpio. Now, we will ask Justice Carpio, what can we do?
We have the diplomatic response. Now, we have tried to negotiate with China, as I said, but China just humiliated us at the negotiating table, and nothing has happened from 1995 to 2012, a span of more than 70 years. So, and besides, when you are negotiating with China, you are negotiating with a country that's more powerful than you. And the ASEAN brothers have their own interests. The most that they could do is settle the dispute through international law, including UNCLOS. That's the most. But they have their own relationships. For China in a war or even in a skirmish. We have our defense state maritime claim. We question the 9-line because that is the vulnerability of China. We look for the vulnerability of China, the Achilles heel, and it's the 9-line. We could not have fought China economically. We would be no much. Militarily, no much. Diplomatically, politically, no much. There was this big hole in their defense, the 9-line, and that's what we have done. Thank you.
We'll proceed with the spoken to our speakers, and as part of reactors, we will call on Attorney Ibanez, the President of Maritime Law, Admiral Donato, the Chairman of the Maritime Forum, and M.I.S.M.O, the President of the Institute of Maritime Ocean Affairs of UP Diliman, and Ms. Arlene Pateranga, the President of INDUCTION. Thank you, Antonio Carpio. behalf of Maritime Forum, MOA, MARLAW, Maritime Association of the Philippines is a group composed of different legal practitioners. Actually, not all are legal practitioners, but most of us are lawyers involved in the legal side of maritime. And now we are joining forces with the Maritime Forum, wherein we discuss the different legal issues of our profession. So we call on our president, Marty Ibanez, our executive vice president, Keith Yoquinto, and our Senior Associate Justice Partner Carpio for the induction of our new members.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to induct the new members of the Maritime Law Station. Francisco Maras, Agnes Bayen, Joel Salas, Ken R. Fedor, Camelia Hoya, King Campus Cross Street, John A. M. Manyo, Federico Rojas, Pearson Inticiano, Richard Sanchez, Paulo Suarez, Carly Serrano, Paulo Salvan, Anthony Rodney M. Delicarda, and Attorney Julius Llano.
Ako ay Pilipino, ang dugo'y maharlika. Likas sa aking puso at